Hello friends, my name is Steve Guttenberg and I am the Audiophiliac, and today's show is all about the CABASSE Murano speaker. Now I go way back with CABASSE to the 90s when I sold their speakers at Sound by Singer. And I remember there were these, they made conventional box speakers, but they also had these spherical speakers that I absolutely loved that had coaxial drivers. So now that they're back in the US, they're being distributed by Upscale Audio in California. Great company and does a great job with distribution. So I'm really pleased to have some ears on time with this CABASSE Murano speaker. Now it's a three-way design. It looks like a two-way, but it has a coaxial driver. There's a 7-inch honeycomb woofer. It's actually a fiberglass skinned honeycomb driver. It's a sandwich design. The coaxial has a 1-inch Caladex tweeter, that's a film tweeter, set into a waveguide. And then there's a polypropylene mid-range driver. I'll show you a cutaway view of the driver. It's really interesting. It doesn't look anything like other coaxials I've seen. Oh yeah, and of course there will be an Audiophiliac Viewer system of the day later on in today's show. And the other thing I can't forget is there is a floor-standing version of the Murano. Now I'm going to put up the specifications, but the one that jumps out for me is that impedance. It drops down to 3.6 ohms, which is pretty darn low, meaning, yes, once again, I feel like I say this in almost every speaker review, you need to use an amplifier that's capable of driving 4 ohm loads. In other words, check the spec, make sure your amp has a 4 ohm rating. So over the course of this review, I used 3 amplifiers. The first one and the main one was the PASS XA25, 50 watts channel into 4 ohms, the Mytek Brooklyn, which is 300 watts channel into 4 ohms, and this new Korean amplifier. I am really excited about this, really tiny. It's called the NUM 23R. It's 45 watts channel into 4 ohms. And that little guy, it's a tiny little amplifier, actually sounded really good with the Murano. The drivers and the crossover are made in France. The cabinet, though, this beautifully curved, really solidly built cabinet, is made in China. As you can plainly see, the rear panel has a port and some beautifully crafted, jewelry grade, I'd even say, binding posts. I haven't mentioned the price. Yes, it is $3,998 a pair in gloss black, gloss white lacquer finishes, and a really stunning mahogany. So there you go. I'd always try to mention the warranty, and in this case, the warranty runs to 5 years. And of course, here in the US, that will be covered by Upscale Audio. So let's get into it. Let's get into what this puppy sounds like. First of all, it's got 2 key strengths: imaging and tone. It just has this, you know what it is? It made me feel like I was listening to a tube amplifier, and I mean that in the best way. Not that it sounded slow or bushy or anything. No, in the way it was, I hate to use this word because it's a kind of a cliche, but holographic in its imaging. But the imaging was so solid. The center image was so right there, but left to right, depth, height, it had a palpable presence. It just did. And by comparison, the Buckhart S400 Mark II that I just happen to have around here, it did not have that kind of presence. You know, the Buckhart is a great speaker, it's about half the price, but it sounded thinner, and when I played piano recordings, which I did a lot, I was just in a piano mode lately, it made pianos sound considerably smaller and less dynamic over the Buckhart than they did over the Murano. It's interesting, this review follows hot on the heels of the Magnepan LRS Plus. Now that speaker, which stands 51 inches high on its stands, presents a huge soundstage, closer to life-size than what I got from the Murano. But the Murano's overall sound just had more weight to it, much better mid-range tonality. It had more, and I'm using the word incorrectly, I know, gravitas. It just had more solidity to it. And when I returned back to the LRS, it sounded kind of wimpy and thin. So, but you have to remember, from a reviewer's point of view, I hear all these products, let's say sequentially, one after another, after another, after another, and I just spent so much time with the LRS, I figured, yeah, let me just quickly compare LRS Plus to the Murano, and the differences were stark. So I've been deep into Neil's Fromm lately, and I just keep going through his catalog, but the one that I'm going to start with here is called Felt. And it's called Felt because he was recording late at night. He didn't want to disturb his neighbors, so he put Felt on the strings to damp the strings, and then he close mic'd them, very, very close mic'd. It's described in the notes, so he wouldn't have to play very loud. So you hear this subtlety, this intimacy, very, very close, but at the same time, he also used other mics distant, and it's close and ambient at the same time. And the texture and just the sense of hammers, felt hammers hitting damp strings is just amazing. You just feel like you're in this exploration mode with a piano, because you've never heard a piano sound like this. The other thing I get hung up on with piano recordings in particular is dynamic shading. A lot of times dynamics we're talking about wham bam, hit you in the chest, slam dynamics. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about subtle differences in the way he's hitting the keys that really comes through very, very clearly over the Murano. So I'm a big fan of Neil's acoustic recordings, but this one, Dirten, is pretty much all electronic as far as I can tell. And it's got sputtery, weird pops and noises and things, but it's actually very musical and again, ambient, but it's like you're hearing transmissions from another dimension. It is so interesting the way he just lays out these soundscapes. And the Murano is just a champ at just unraveling the mysteries and just presenting them to you. They're right there. They're right in front of you. Really, really special. I'm talking about the music, but the way the Murano just lets it all happen. Somehow the Eels haven't been on my radar for quite some time, but this recording with The Sound of Fear, one of the tunes, well, first of all, that title just grabbed my attention right away, but the bass and drums that propel this song in this very primitive sounding reverb, and the song itself is just great. Matter of fact, the whole album is really, really good. It's not a recent record, it's from way back. But these speakers were just that thing of letting me hear that interplay of the band extremely well. I could follow each instrument very, very clearly in the soundstage, but it was that sense of forward momentum that really grabbed me. I was boogieing to this track. For this review, I was mostly playing CDs and streaming, but I did sneak in a bit of vinyl here and there. And this one, just last night, I played Aretha Franklin's Greatest Hits. Now, I remember buying this record when it was new in the 60s. I think it was the 60s, and I hadn't owned any of Aretha's other music before. So I played it a lot. I mean, it's such a great programming. It is the greatest hits, and it's all phenomenal. But the difference in analog versus digital over the Murano was just black and white. I mean, tone. I keep coming back to tone. That's what this speaker does so well, and it made my solid-state amplifier sound kind of tubey, again, in the best possible way in terms of the believability of the sound, the wholeness to it, the organic quality of it, especially on a record like Aretha's. Man, oh man, because remember, these records are pretty much live in a studio. There's not a lot of tweaking after the fact. This is the band playing and she's singing, and that's it. That's what you get. And man, oh man, is it good. Getting back to pianos, the Murano gets the percussive quality of piano really, really well. That hammer hitting the string. It is a percussion instrument after all, and you really sense that this speaker can deliver that kind of detail, that kind of transient energy exceptionally well. And that combined with this beautiful tone and incredible imaging makes for a terrific combination. Now that's actually, okay, that was, so Steve, what do you really think? Because it just engages you. It does, because of its beauty. It portrays beauty so well. And yet, on that Nils record with all the distortion and electronics, the tactile quality of that stuff really shined through. So it kind of does it all. It gets the electronic edge and grain and grit from that recording. Yeah, it's right there. And yet, when it needs to be sweet and seductive, it can do that as well. So yeah, I'm blown away by this speaker. Speaking of being blown away, it is now time for the Audiophile Viewer system of the day. This one comes from Levent. He is in Istanbul, Turkey. And I really do, I like that he's in the picture with his system. Anyway, his turntable is a Marantz TT15S1. Phono stage is Transrotor Phono 2. Buffer is an iFi iTube 2. Preamp, Advanced Acoustic X. The power is also Advanced Acoustic XA160. Speakers, you guessed it, Advanced Acoustic K11S. There's a super tweeter on there. It's from Townsend. Cables are DH Lab. Grounding is Enertech Silver Minis. And the tweaks are by Stein Music. Thanks, Levent. All right, we are back. My name is Steve Guttenberg, and yes, I am the Audiophile. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, please consider joining my Patreon. It's at patreon.com/audiophile, but I will link to that below. You can join for a few dollars a month, up to $50 a month. You know the drill at this point. It's the best way to keep this channel going and going strong, because now I'm doing these podcasts for extra value, added value. I'm doing podcasts. I have my own website, which is linked to below, the Audiophile Podcast, but you can hear it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, etc., all the usual places podcasts are heard. You will hear the Audiophile Podcast. And after that, well, I've been making more of a point of this lately, but it is important for my viewers who will like what I'm doing, and not everybody does, but the ones that you like, the episodes that you like, please remember to hit the like button. Don't hit it too hard. I don't want you to hurt yourself. But the like is important to the YouTube algorithm and is therefore important to me. And you could, if you haven't yet to do so, please subscribe to this channel. There's 214,000 other people that have. What are you waiting for? Anyway, check it out. I think we're good. So thank you so much for being here, sticking around to the very, very end. And I really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.